The crystalline spires of Herculean pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning. For the first time in a century, the ancient Colosseum buzzed with anticipation. Thousands had gathered from across the galaxy, their ships darkening the skies above the capital world. Today, the dragon would choose. Kale pressed himself against a cool marble pillar, trying to stay invisible. At 12 years old, he had learned that being small and quiet kept him safe. The human ambassador had brought him along to carry bags and fetch water, nothing more. Humans were new to galactic society, barely tolerated by the ancient species that dominated the stars. Kale knew his place was in the shadows. Around him, the Colosseum roared with color and sound. The Velcari delegation shimmered with psychic energy, their crystalline bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. The Crothian prince stood 3 times Kale's height, his red armor gleaming, muscles like twisted steel. The Cirithian Heir floated in a containment field, her body made of pure plasma, crackling with barely contained power. "Make way for Prince Thorinus," a voice boomed. The crowd parted as a being covered in golden scales strode forward, servants scattering rose petals in his path. Kale counted at least 40 species represented, each royal heir more magnificent than the last. He had never felt smaller. A tremor ran through the ground. The crowd fell silent. From the massive gates at the Colosseum center, darkness emerged. Then came the sound, a breathing like wind through mountain caves. Ancient and deep, the darkness took shape. Verith the Eternal stepped into the light. Kale's breath caught. The dragon was beyond anything he had imagined. Scales like polished obsidian covered a body larger than the human ambassador's entire ship. Each scale held swirling galaxies within its surface, as if the dragon wore the cosmos itself. Wings folded against its sides could have shaded a city. But it was the eyes that held Kale frozen, eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, holding sadness deeper than space. "I am Verith." The dragon's voice resonated in every mind present, bypassing ears entirely. "For 10,000 years, I have chosen those worthy to guide the celestial throne. Let those who would rule approach." Prince Thorinus stepped forward first, his golden armor blazing. "Great Verith, I am—" The dragon's gaze passed over him like he was transparent. Thorinus stumbled back, his confidence crumbling. The Crothian prince roared and charged forward, his war hammer raised. "I claim the throne by right of strength." The hammer swung down and passed through empty air. The dragon had simply turned its head. The prince crashed into the sand, humiliated. One by one they came. The psychic Velcari princess tried to merge mind with Verith, only to cry out and collapse, overwhelmed by the vastness she touched. The Cirithian Heir offered advanced technology. Verith reduced it to slag with a glance. A prince from the merchant collective brought chests of precious metals. The dragon yawned, revealing teeth like ancient swords. Hours passed. Kale watched, fascinated despite himself. The dragon seemed bored? No, something else. Lonely, perhaps. Each heir approached with demands, with shows of strength or wealth or breeding. None spoke to Verith, as if the ancient being might have feelings of its own. A small movement caught Kale's eye. Near the dragon's massive foreleg, a tiny creature huddled, a flitterling, like the ones from Earth's old forests. It must have hidden in the ambassador's luggage. The little animal trembled, about to be crushed by the crowd of approaching nobles. Kale didn't think. He darted from his hiding spot, dodging between legs and tails and tentacles. Guards shouted, but he was quick. He scooped up the flitterling, holding it close to his chest, feeling its rapid heartbeat against his palm. "Hey, it's okay," he whispered to the creature. "You're safe now." Then he looked up. The dragon's massive head had turned. Ancient eyes, each one larger than Kale's entire body, focused on him. The boy froze. Around him, thousands of beings held their breath. Armored guards rushed forward to drag the human child away from the sacred trial. "Stop." Veritha's voice shook the stones. The guards froze mid-step. Kale stood alone in the center of the Colosseum, a small human boy holding an even smaller creature, looking up at a dragon older than stars. He should have been terrified. Instead, he noticed something in those ancient eyes, something he recognized from looking in broken mirrors in the orphanage back home. "You look sad," Kale said softly. "Are you lonely?" The Colosseum erupted in chaos. The guards lunged toward Kale, but their feet wouldn't move. An invisible force held them in place. Veritha's enormous head lowered, descending through the air like a falling moon, until the dragon's eye was level with the small human boy. Kale swallowed hard but didn't run. The flitterling in his arms had stopped trembling. Running would only scare it again. "Child." Veritha's voice filled his mind, gentler now, like distant thunder rather than an earthquake. "What is your name?" "Kale, sir." "I mean, your majesty." He stopped, confused. "I don't know what call a dragon." A sound rumbled from Veritha's chest. It took Kale a moment to realize the ancient being was laughing. Around them, alien royalty stood frozen in disbelief. The human ambassador looked ready to faint. "In 10,000 years, no one has asked," Veritha said. "They demand, they boast, they perform. But none have asked what I need." The dragons, I studied him with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in his life. "You see me, small one, not what I represent, not the power I hold. You see me, you were watching them all fail." Kale said quietly, "It made you sad. I know that look. I used to see it when the older kids of the orphanage would fight over who got adopted. Nobody ever picked me either." Silence blanketed the Colosseum. Prince Dorenes' mouth hung open. The Velcari princess's crystalline form pulsed with shocked energy. Veritha's head lifted slightly. "Come closer, Kale." The boy took 3 steps forward. His legs shook, but held. The dragon's snout was now directly above him, scales reflecting his small image 1,000 times over. Warm breath washed over him, smelling of ancient stone and starlight. "Place your hand upon my scales." Kale reached up, his palm pressed against the obsidian surface. The scale felt warm, alive, humming with energy older than his entire species. Light exploded from the point of contact. Pain and warmth flooded through Kale simultaneously. He gasped as symbols burned themselves into his skin, flowing script in a language that predated galaxies, running up his right arm in silver blue light. The marks of the chosen. They had appeared on only 19 beings in all of recorded history, each one becoming emperor or empress of the celestial throne. Now, they marked an orphaned human child. "No!" The shout came from Princess Velcari. "This is impossible. He's nothing. A primitive, a servant, Silence." Veritha's voice cracked like a whip. The princess stumbled backward. "I have spoken. The trial is complete." Prince Dorenes found his voice. "Great Verith, surely there's been a mistake. The child must have used some trick, some human deception. You dare question my judgment?" The dragon's words dripped with dangerous calm. "You, who approached me as if I were a prize to be claimed. You, who saw only power to be taken." Veritha's gaze swept across the assembled royalty. "For a century, I have waited. I have watched your empires groom heirs who see only thrones and crowns. Not one of you asked if I was well. Not one saw me as anything but a tool." Kale staggered, his arm still burning with the marks. The flitterling chirped softly in his other hand. He stroked his head with one finger, tried to calm it despite his own confusion. This child protected the smallest creature in this place while surrounded by giants, Verith continued. He offered compassion to a being he had every reason to fear. He saw loneliness where others saw only power. The dragon's wings unfurled, casting shadows across the Colosseum. The celestial throne is his by right of trial. The Crothian prince stepped forward, fists clenched. "The clans will never accept this. A human, leading the empire? We will tear the galaxy apart before we bow to, then tear it apart." Veritha's voice went cold. "I grow weary of this cycle. Perhaps the empire deserves to fall if it cannot accept what is plainly before its eyes." The dragon looked down at Kale again, and the warmth returned. "Will you accept this burden, small one? I will not force it upon you." Kale looked at his marked arm, then at the thousands of alien beings staring at it with expressions ranging from rage to shock to disbelief. He thought of the orphanage, of being invisible, of never belonging anywhere. He was 12 years old. He didn't understand politics or war or ruling. He didn't even know the names of most of the species present. But he understood one thing clearly. You shouldn't have to be lonely, Kale said softly. If you need someone, I'll try. The dragon's ancient eyes glistened. Then it is done. The council chamber felt like a cage. 50 alien dignitaries surrounded Kale, their voices rising in heated argument. He sat in a chair too large for him, feet dangling above the floor, trying to follow conversations in languages he barely understood. The trial's result is unacceptable, Ambassador Thexnor announced, his 4 arms crossed. We demand proof that this child possesses a capacity to rule. The human ambassador started protests, but Veritha's deep voice cut through the chaos. Name your terms. The Velcari princess leaned forward, her crystalline face gleaming with satisfaction. 3 trials. The traditional tests of leadership. Strategic command, diplomatic resolution, and the trial of memory. Her smile was sharp. If he fails even once, we overthrow the dragon's choice and hold a new selection. Kale's stomach twisted. He'd heard whispers about these trials. They were designed for trained warriors and seasoned politicians, not orphaned children. I accept, Vera said calmly. Wait, Kale began, but the dragon's gentle thought touched his mind. Trust yourself. Small one, you have already done the impossible. 3 days later, Kale stood in the Strategic Command Center, staring at holographic star systems floating before him. His opponent was a Nexus 7, an artificial intelligence that had never lost a military simulation. Thousands watched through view screens across the galaxy. Begin, the moderator announced. The AI struck immediately. Red enemy markers swarmed across the display, cutting supply lines, surrounding Kale's forces. The boy's hands trembled over controls. He didn't understand half the tactical options available. The enemy was everywhere at once. Then Kale noticed something. Small blue dots on the map, civilian populations trapped in war zones. The AI ignored them completely, focusing purely on military targets. It was winning, but people were dying. Kale stopped trying to fight. Instead, he redirected every available ship toward evacuations. He abandoned military positions to save colonies. He surrendered territory to protect refugee convoys. The tactical display turned blood red as enemy forces advanced. The human child is losing spectacularly, Prince Thorinus announced with satisfaction. But then the casualty counter appeared. Kale's forces had suffered military defeat, but civilian deaths were nearly zero. The AI strategy, while victorious, had left millions dead in simulated crossfire. Veritha's voice filled the chamber. A ruler who values subjects over territory understands what truly matters. Victory without people to protect is meaningless. The child passes. The council erupted in argument, but the result stood. The second trial came quickly. 2 noble houses, the Fethrin and the Corval, had been fighting for generations over a border system. Both sides sat opposite ends of a long table, refusing to even look at each other. Kale was supposed to negotiate peace. Lord Fethrin sneered down at him. Child, my family has defended our claim for 300 years. What could you possibly understand? Nothing, Kale admitted. I don't understand your history, or your honor, or your reasons. He looked between them. But can I ask you both something? Lady Corval waved dismissively. Speak. The soldiers who died in your last battle, did any of them want to be there? Silence. Lord Fethrin's expression darkened. War is not about wanting. I grew up in an orphanage, Kale interrupted quietly. Most of the kids there had parents who died in someone else's war. They didn't choose that. They just wanted their families. He turned to the viewing screens. Can I talk to the troop stationed at the border? This is highly irregular, the moderator began. Let him try, Verith rumbled. Minutes later, Kale spoke directly to soldiers on both sides, not to generals or nobles, but to common troops. He asked simple questions. Do you want this war? Do you believe in this fight? If you could go home tomorrow, would you? The answers came hesitantly at first, then in a flood. Soldiers on both sides were tired. They had families, dreams, lives beyond fighting over a system neither would truly benefit from. As the troops spoke openly, their words broadcast across both territories. Public opinion shifted like a landslide. Within hours, soldiers on both sides refused to fight. Nobles could command war, but not if their armies simply walked away. The peace came not from above, but from below. Unconventional, Lady Corval admitted grudgingly, but effective. The final trial loomed, the trial of memory. Kale would enter Veritha's mind and experience 10,000 years of history. Most adults emerged broken or mad from the weight of it. Kale stood before the dragon, marked arm glowing. Will it hurt? Yes, Vera said honestly, but I will be with you. The dragon's eyes flashed. Kale's world dissolved into light and ancient memory. He saw empires rise and crumble like sandcastles, watched wars consume billions, felt the dragon's grief as chosen rulers became tyrants, experienced the crushing loneliness of watching civilizations destroy themselves repeatedly. It should have broken him. But Kale had lived with loss his entire short life. He understood grief, and somehow, in understanding Veritha's pain, he found strength rather than madness. When he emerged, tears streaming down his face, he turned to the dragon. You're so tired. You shouldn't carry this alone anymore. Veritha lowered his great head. Now you understand why I chose you. The coronation ceremony should have been magnificent. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Kale wore robes that dragged on the ground, a crown that kept sliding down his forehead, and faced a crowd where half the attendees glared at him with open hostility. As the ceremonial words were spoken, 3 entire sectors of the empire went dark on the communication grid. Prince Thorenis, Princess Velcari, and the Crothian clans had formed an alliance. They called themselves the Legitimate Council, and they refused to acknowledge a human child as emperor. We have reports of fleet movements. The military advisor whispered urgently during the ceremony. They're mobilizing for war. Kale's hand trembled as he held the ceremonial scepter. He was 13 now, barely a year older than when he'd stumbled into the trial. He'd learned much, but not how to stop a rebellion. The weeks that followed were chaos. Humanity's status shifted overnight. Some humans celebrated, drunk on sudden importance. Others feared the target now painted on their backs. Earth received delegations from 100 worlds, some seeking favor, others making thinly veiled threats. Kale tried to govern as his trials had taught him. He established councils where smaller species could finally speak. He redirected military budgets toward rebuilding forgotten colonies. He asked questions that made the old advisors uncomfortable. Why do we need such a large military? Who are we fighting? What if we tried talking first? Your Majesty, the War Council leader said with barely concealed frustration, these are not matters a child can understand. Then explain them to me. Kale replied simply, if they're too complicated for me to understand, maybe they're too complicated to be good ideas. The rebellion came on a cold morning. 300 warships emerged from hyperspace above Drakelion, their weapons charged and ready. The Legitimate Council broadcast across all channels. Citizens of the Empire, Princess Velcari's voice rang out. We come to liberate you from the farce that has infected the celestial throne. A human child cannot lead us. We will remove this pretender and restore proper order. Alarms screamed across the capital. The defense fleet scrambled to respond. Kale stood in the command center, watching red markers fill the displays. His advisors shouted orders, preparing for battle. Stop, Kale said quietly. No one heard him over the chaos. Stop, he shouted, his voice cracking with adolescence and fear. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to stare at their young emperor. Don't fire, Kale said. I won't start my rule by killing people. Your Majesty, they'll destroy us, the Admiral began. Then let them. Kale's voice was steady now, though his hands shook. If the only way to keep this throne is through violence, I don't want it. The child is a coward. Prince Thorenis' voice boomed over the open channel. He cannot even defend himself. This proves our point. Surrender now, boy, and we'll show mercy. Kale opened a channel, his young face appearing on every screen in the rebel fleet. I'm not surrendering, but I'm not fighting either. If you want the throne, come and take it. But I won't let people die over me. The rebel fleet advanced, weapons hot. Citizens under Keelian's surface fled to shelters. The defense fleet waited for orders that wouldn't come. Kale stood at the window, watching death approach. Then the sky changed. Vareth rose from beneath the palace, wings spreading wide enough to shadow the entire capital city. The dragon had been silent during Kale's reign, allowing the boy to rule on his own. But now, the ancient being's patience had ended. The dragon's voice crashed across every communication system, every mind, every consciousness within 100 light years. Enough. The rebel fleet froze. Not metaphorically. Their ship simply stopped, engines still running but unable to move, as if trapped in invisible ice. Weapons powered down against their crew's will. 300 warships hung helpless in space. "You have forgotten what I am," Vareth continued, and there was a terrible coldness in those words. "I am not a tradition. I am not a symbol. I am a guardian older than your civilizations, and my patience has limits." Inside the flagship, Princess Velcari struggled against her immobilized body. "You cannot interfere. The trial is complete." "The trial is never complete," Vareth said. "Every day I watch. Every day I judge. You would tear apart the Empire because your pride is wounded." The dragon's eyes blazed. "Challenge my choice again, and I will choose no one. I will let this Empire collapse into the darkness it deserves. I am done watching the powerful destroy what the powerless have built." The threat hung in the void. An empire without Vareth's blessing would fragment into 1,000 warring factions. Everyone knew it. Slowly, carefully, the dragon released its hold. The rebel fleet could move again. For a long moment, no one knew what would happen. Then Kale's voice, young and uncertain but genuine, spoke across the channels. "Princess Velcari, Prince Thorinus, all of you, please. Just talk to me. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me what you're afraid of. Let me try to understand." In the flagship, Princess Velcari stared at the screen, showing the small human boy who had just offered mercy to those who came to kill him. Something in her crystalline heart cracked. "Stand down," she whispered. "All ships, stand down." The rebellion ended not with battle, but with an invitation to the table. 20 years had passed since a small boy stumbled into history. Kale stood at the same window where he'd once watched a rebellion approach, but now his reflection showed a man in his 30s. The silver-blue marks on his arm had faded to soft scars, but they still caught the light. The Empire had transformed. The celestial throne still existed, but it no longer held absolute power. The Galactic Council met in rotating locations, giving voice to species that had once been ignored or enslaved. Former warrior cultures now hosted peace conferences. Trade routes that had been closed for centuries now connected distant worlds. Humanity had found its place not as conquerors, but as bridges. Human diplomats worked across the galaxy, their relative newness making them trusted mediators. Human artists collaborated with alien composers, creating music that transcended species. Human teachers shared their philosophies while learning from ancient civilizations. It wasn't perfect. Old prejudices died slowly. Some systems still resisted change. But the galaxy was healing. Kale climbed the ancient steps to Vareth's sanctuary, a journey he made alone once each month. The dragon rested on a platform of crystal, smaller than Kale remembered. Or perhaps he'd simply grown. "You're tired," Kale said, settling beside the great head. "I am old, little one, though you are not so little anymore." Vareth's voice was gentler now, less a command and more of a conversation. "I have carried this burden for longer than you can imagine." Then rest. The galaxy can stand without constant watching. Can it? The dragon's eye opened, studying him. "Tell me truthfully, have I succeeded or merely delayed the inevitable?" Kale thought carefully. "You've given us a chance. What we do with it is our choice." He paused. "There's something I need to tell you. I'm not choosing a successor alone." Interest flickered in Vareth's ancient gaze. "Oh, every species will nominate candidates. Those candidates will work together on a project to improve the galaxy, not competing against each other, but collaborating. You can observe, but the final choice will be made by council vote with your guidance." Kale smiled. No more trials where princes fight over you like a prize. No more loneliness. For a long moment, Vareth was silent. Then that familiar rumbling laugh echoed through the sanctuary. You would democratize a divine selection? The noble houses will hate this. They already hated me being chosen. At least this way, they can't blame you for picking wrong. Kale's expression grew serious. You were ready to let it all end, weren't you? That day in the Colosseum. I wasn't your last choice. I was your final test. If I'd failed like the others, you would have walked away. You see too much, Vareth murmured. But there was no denial in those ancient eyes. Yes, I was done. 10,000 years of watching power corrupt even the best intentions. I thought perhaps the galaxy needed to collapse, to rebuild from nothing. The dragons had lowered until his snout nearly touched Kale. But you didn't try to rule. You tried to serve. You broke the cycle I thought was unbreakable. I was just scared and confused most of the time, Kale admitted. I still am, honestly. That is why you succeeded. Fear keeps us humble. Confusion keeps us questioning. The moment a ruler believes they have all the answers is the moment they stop listening. They sat together in comfortable silence, emperor and dragon, both tired but content. Days later, Kale visited an orphanage on a distant mining world. No cameras, no ceremony, just a man in simple clothes sitting with children who had nowhere else to go. They gathered around him, curious about the marks on his arm, asking endless questions. Is it true you rode the dragon? A small girl asked, eyes wide. No, but he let me sit next to him sometimes. He's actually quite comfortable, like a warm mountain. What's the most important thing a leader needs? A boy with scarred hands asked. Kale thought of that day in the Colosseum, of Vareth's lonely eyes, of every mistake he'd made and somehow survived. The ability to admit when others know better than you, he said finally, and the courage to listen to people everyone else ignores. The quietest voice in the room sometimes has the most important thing to say. The children nodded, not fully understanding but sensing the truth in his words. That night, back on Terkelion, Vareth settled into the deepest sleep he'd known in millennia. The dragon's duty wasn't ended, but for the first time in 10,000 years, he wasn't carrying it alone. The empire would rise and fall, struggle and grow, but would do so with wisdom earned rather than power inherited. Above the sanctuary, stars wheeled in their ancient dance. And on 100 worlds, beings of 1,000 species looked up at those same stars and saw not an empire, but community still learning to understand itself. The trial that had begun with an orphaned boy and a lonely dragon had become something neither expected, a legacy not a power, but a hope. The galaxy was far from perfect, but it was trying, and sometimes trying was enough.